Hello everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Rugby Bunker podcast. Incredibly excited to have Charlie Morgan back again with me. Hello Charlie.
Hello mate, how are you?
I'm all well, thank you mate. How are you? I mean, it's nice to have you back. Nice to be back for the second episode. We spoke a bit last week about a really kind of wide range of topics, didn't we? So this week, what are we going to touch on? What are we going to look at?
We're lots of lovely Lee Blackett. So he's been officially appointed in the interim between those episodes as England attack coach, which is very interesting as far as the influence he can have on the side. You've been at another launch event for TNT in their coverage of the Premiership, the Prem. And there's other bits and bobs to get into as well.
Lots to unpack. So this is our second podcast. If you missed the Tuesday YouTube episode, which featured Alex Bywater of the Daily Mail, I would highly recommend checking that out. We spoke all things R360, which he's been across, and we had a chat about the Welsh regions as well, which he's also clued up with. So yeah, thoroughly recommend checking that out. Charlie, before we start, I want to know, what do you find harder to believe? The fact that Antoine Dupont has been in California just chatting with the Apple chief executive, Tim Cook, which seems pretty strange, or the fact that James O'Connor flew all the way to the UK, landed in London on Monday, and he didn't even get a chance to get to Leicester to meet his new teammates because he then had to fly all the way back to, I think he's gone straight to Auckland actually to prepare for next week's Rugby Championship fixtures.
Can I say no? Neither of those things. I just feel that Dupont has been rubbing shoulders with the great and the good across all spheres, sporting and otherwise. So this just seems like a natural step for a guy that's going places and really is a kind of cut through star of the sport. And then that James O'Connor situation sums up a lot of what the Wallabies are having to sort of fight against, or the sort of challenges that they've got and the challenges that they're meeting quite impressively over this Rugby Championship campaign, both as far as player availability and how they have to juggle the kind of club release. And Will Skelton isn't in that group that's going to New Zealand, for instance, because he's still with La Rochelle, and also their 10 situation, because when James O'Connor's been on the pitch, they've just looked that little bit more assured. And in the sort of time between us recording the two Thursdays of the Rugby Bunker, he's come off the bench again in a game against Argentina and very nearly directed what was an even more ludicrous comeback. So odd situations, but odd situations that I guess you kind of come to expect.
I'm so nosy, mate. I need to know. What are Dupont and Tim Cook chatting about? Like is Tim Cook asking Dupont about strike moves? Like, is Dupont giving his feedback about the latest kind of speakers on the iPhone, or the latest kind of construction of the camera? Like, I need to know, because part of me can't really put myself in that conversation. Yeah, James O'Connor. I mean, imagine getting that text after landing at Heathrow or whatever, having travelled from Australia, and it's like, oh, sorry, mate, we need you in Auckland, like now. I think he might already be there, based on what Christy Doran, our friend at the Raw, was reporting. I think O'Connor's already there. Ridiculous. A bit on the TNT launch yesterday. So yeah, eventually, as Charlie hinted, we will stop just attending media launches and nice press junkets to get snacks and actually go to some games and do some reporting. But it was quite interesting hearing about their kind of plans for the coverage that you're going to see of the Premiership moving forward. They've signed this very long extension, actually, Charlie, all the way until 2031, haven't they?
Yep, 5 years.
Which, you know, is a pretty significant deal, because, yeah, that's right, because it's an extension from the deal that runs out at the end of this season. So they were talking about what we're going to see this season, and you're going to get a lot more of the sideline features, which I know you were a big fan of, Charlie, when they had David Flatman on the touchline for a scrum. I think it was between Bath and Gloucester, wasn't it? Because he was talking about Benno Urbano and Afo Fosogbon, and like how they are like very different body types as props, looking for very different things in terms of technique and power, and essentially commentated on how that scrum played out. So we're going to see more of that. And Brian O'Driscoll did a similar thing, I think, trying to predict kind of what strike move I think X2 are going to play off a scrum in one game. So yeah, that's encouraging, right? That's good.
Yeah, and it's a different way of sort of certainly the scrum. The scrum sort of package and breaking away to David Flatman on the touchline very close to that set piece was just a really good way of elevating what is a fundamentally critical part of the game that just still gets overlooked, and you just still get, and I think it is becoming less and less frequent. But I spoke to David after. Nobody's ever called him David, I don't think. But I spoke to David after after he did that piece, and his sort of suggestion was that he would be biased as a kind of ex-prop, but it's no longer good enough to sort of go ho ho ho. I don't really know what's going on there in the front row, because it governs the course of games, it governs the course of seasons, it governs the course of World Cups. So anything we can do to get more awareness of the little nuances that go on there, absolutely all for.
My brain genuinely went, "Who's David?" Like I was completely flummoxed by that. So that was quite interesting, and the stuff, as in better explainers about scrums, ties into what they're trying to do. This whole rebrand, as we spoke about last week, there is a huge emphasis on physicality, on celebrating the kind of brutality of it, and that was underlined again yesterday. We asked a couple of questions about why the rebrand, and the whole Prem idea is essentially because, yes, they all call it the Prem anyway, as we already know. Also to try and differentiate it a bit between the league and the Premiership Rugby Cup. There's going to be a lot of kind of work going into that, so you might see very different graphics during games, which all makes sense. If anyone else is a regular follower of the NFL like I am, you can tell which network is broadcasting each game just from a little glimpse, because their score bugs and all the graphics are so different. So I think we'll see something very similar from the league, which is very good. Dan Biggar was unveiled as the latest kind of full-time TNT pundit. I think he'll be very good. He's got lots of excellent opinions, and obviously always good to have a regular kind of, or a recent, player coming in and filling that role. So I think that's a real positive. And yeah, Oval Insights were there, who are the league's kind of stats partner, and they sort of unveiled a load of stats, quizzed people about some of the best performers last season. There was one stat which did stick out about Thomas Williams, which I wanted to mention, because they asked the panel of pundits who was the best kicker last season, and they measure that on kind of successful like meters gained on the most consistent basis. And the answer, Charlie, if you had to guess who the best kicker was, not to put you on the spot, who do you think it would be?
Well, I've seen it, and I guess I've seen it. I've seen you written down the answer, because I'm very and I've read the script, but it is an interesting answer that I wouldn't have predicted. I guess I'd have looked at somebody like. Well, it's tricky, isn't it? Because actually, I probably would have guessed Ben Spencer, just because he takes a lot of that onus for Bath. Bath ended up as champions. I guess they would have thought about a lot of different factors, right? Like how many because kick errors can really be crippling to a side. If you're kicking out on the full from outside your 22, I'm just thinking as a 9 here, because that's because I've got Ben Spencer in my head. That's a big error that you're losing 30 meters, you're losing possession as well. But unveil the answer, Colsey.
Is it bad that I thought you might not have seen it on the script or the script,
No,
and therefore
no.
that you might have been able to?
It's revealing. It's revealing of your opinion of me.
Oh, but
that's fine.
Now I feel like a bad person. So it's Thomas Williams, not to leave you in suspense, listeners and viewers. Yeah, Thomas Williams, who averaged, I genuinely found this stat quite interesting. He averaged 36 meters with his exit kicks from his 22, which is considerable if you think about how much ground he's therefore gaining and how much Gloucester are getting out of their own half, and actually kind of goes against the perception that last season they were entirely this attacking side, whereas actually, as George Skivington said at the launch, they got a little bit more balanced as the season went on.
Just quickly, what were the metrics that they looked at to sort of determine him as the best kicker?
I think it was that consistency. It was that consistency of net gain. So basically, how often are you alleviating pressure through your kicking game? I think that was what they were going for, because my first instinct was to think, think the question was framed as the best tactical kicker. And so my first thought was, it's probably like George Ford. I was thinking about the accumulation of like 50 22s in a season or whatever. So that was their answer. But the one final oval thing that I wanted to mention, and I think in next week's episode, we will pick our playoff teams. We might even pick a whole table each, actually. That's something I'm going to do on the off-field review on the Substack on Monday. So I mean, we might as well both do it for the next pod. But Oval's top four, which they took based on how they sort of ranked the teams in terms of difficulty, historical results, and also just the nature of the schedule. They had it. So this is with their percentage chances of making the playoffs. Bath on 65% chance to make the playoffs. They're first. Then Leicester on 49%, then Saracens on 48%, and then Northampton on 44%. So what that means is there's those second, third and fourth teams, there's a 50-50 chance essentially that they will make the playoffs. But I thought it was quite interesting to see Leicester in there, given Leicester are about to have quite an interesting season with a new coach, new kind of staff, a new fly half. And also Northampton, because I think fourth is up for grabs. Just a quick reaction to that, Charlie, before we move on.
Well, yeah, that's two sides that made the playoffs last year, dumped out in Bristol and Sale, and that is where that's how my predictions I think are going to have to start. Is who do I think makes the top four, and then there are some very tricky sort of decisions within that because it's just so close. It really, really is. And then maybe another tactic is to work up from the bottom. I won't sort of spoil who gets dragged down to that sort of, it's not a relegation fight, but who gets dragged down sort of towards the bottom and away from that top four. It is going to be so close, and fair play to Oval for putting themselves out there with those predictions, especially the sort of the sort of the data-led ones, which tend to sort of really rile people up, which is good fun.
What a tease from you there for next week's episode as well. I respect that a lot. So that was everything from the TNT launch. We're going to have a quick break, and then we're going to dive into today's big topic, which is what will Lee Blackett kind of do with England's attack, and how will he transform it after his permanent appointment last week. Right, in this main section of today's podcast, we wanted to take a bit of a deeper look at what Lee Blackett is going to bring to England's attack now that he has officially joined the coaching staff on a permanent basis. So Blackett was the interim attack coach in the summer while Richard Wigglesworth went away with the Lions. Now they they have appointed Blackett as the permanent attack coach. Richard Wigglesworth is going to move to the defence. So Charlie, around, I think it was April or March time, you woke up very early in the morning and went for a little drive with somebody, didn't you? So why don't you reveal who that person was and give us an idea about what you learned from that experience?
It was certainly one of my favourite features that I've ever done, and I've been sizing it up for a while since realising that Lee Blackett didn't move after Wasps folded, and he stayed where he lived in sort of rural Leicestershire, and first commuted to Scarlets, which was even further, but then stayed there while he was at Bath and made that commute sort of a couple of times every week, if not more. And I really wanted to just do that with him, both to sort of, it was more to get an idea of the demands on coaches, because it's not unusual for coaches to do that, to make sure that their families stay in the same place and that they head out to work, because there's just this awareness, sort of, it's fairly grim awareness, I guess, but a very realistic one, that their jobs, I was told, this wasn't Lee Blackett speaking, but I was speaking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, so there are two types of coaches, ones that have been sacked and ones that are waiting to be sacked. And there's that, but just that fragility, it was sort of a tongue-in-cheek, dark humour way of putting that across. And it was brilliant. Stayed in the hotel the Holiday Inn, or maybe a Premier Inn, can't remember, in Hinckley, and then got a cab over to his house, and we made the drive. I think it's between 2 and 3 hours. But just a really, really interesting insight. Absolute no side to Lee Blackett, as everybody's sort of aware through his dealings with the media. Just a very honest, upfront, very affable guy. clearly just totally obsessed with the game, works so hard. We were talking through his sort of routines, how he builds a week, and how coaches are always juggling the present week with what's ahead, because their preview sort of commitments are so heavy. You know, they're putting together presentations while they're coaching one week, and if they're and they can sort of weight that differently. If it's a particularly important game in a couple of weeks' time, say a knockout game, and then they've got a game where there's less on, they're always having to sort of figure out how they can devote the time. And actually, when I actually spoke to him, he'd been told that he was going to join up with England and Argentina, but it hadn't been announced yet. I don't think it's betraying too many confidences to say, he said that, well, you've heard what my week's like. Now I'm effectively going to have another job on top of this, so it's going to be interesting. But from the job he did in Argentina and USA, he aced it.
Yeah, I really like that you had such an early start that you can't quite remember what hotel brand you stayed with. PR execs for both Holiday Inn and Premier Inn just on tenterhooks going, which was it? Which was it? There's a line in there, because I reread it in preparation for this, obviously, as I do all your work all the time, Charlie, as you know. And there was a line in there from Blackett where you were trying to dig into kind of what his philosophy is, like how does he want his teams to play? What does he want players to kind of feel comfortable with on the field? And bear in mind that Lee himself was a very successful Premiership player, and I'm pretty sure still holds the record for the fastest Premiership try.
I think he does.
Ever.
Yeah, I think so.
I can't remember how quick it was. Is it something like 9 seconds or something?
It's something wild.
Next time you're talking, I will look it up. But yes, there was a line in there about what he wants from players, and he said, "I'm just a fan watching the game, and I don't want to be bored," which I think people at Twickenham are just standing up and applauding, aren't they? The fans who sat through a lot of dull England Test matches. And he continued, "I'd always ask players to express themselves, and my biggest pet hate at the minute is teams kicking the ball away high up the field." Now, I think that's a brilliant philosophy, which a lot of people will be like, that's great. I'm also interested in how, if you're him, you kind of marry that philosophy with the kind of just the nature of Test rugby, and how Test rugby naturally kind of can shift towards being a bit more conservative. I wonder how you think he might go about that, and also just in general what we'll see from a Lee Blackett side, really.
Oh, I mean, I think I mischievously sort of left out the fact that I do remember him sort of going on to say, look, I understand the concept of kick pressure and how sides, you know, how that's such an important part, especially the higher you go up the levels. And he was clearly alluding to Test rugby there. I think we can split the influence that Lee Blackett is going to have on this England side into 3 areas. I was really careful sort of to structure this, because we can really kind of splurge on how we can influence things. And I did want to start with the caveat that the game before he joined, they'd put 68 points on Wales in Wales, and I do think that Richard Wigglesworth is sometimes unfairly maligned for the coach that he is. Another amazing stat that I really enjoy sort of spinning out is that so England, Ireland and France have obviously played each other twice over the last 2 Six Nations. They've all won 2 and lost 2 of those games. And England have scored 14 tries, Ireland have scored 14 tries, France have scored 13 tries. So England's attack has been progressing. That said, I think, so the 3 areas I'd go back to. The first one is just the overall team philosophy. In Argentina, England, this is a very sort of vibey take rather than anything based on hard data. They just looked more willing from strike moves to go wide as opposed to punching it up in midfield and then going from there. And England's launch plays, their first phase stuff, has been clunky in a few games prior to that tour, and they did sort of surrender platforms with just imprecise handling, imprecise running lines, players crowding each other out. And there was a real tangible example of what Lee Blackett can bring in. It's the second try Tom Roebuck scores in the first test against Argentina, and I'm going to play it in the background so I can sort of talk through it. But it's a 6-man line out. They bounce out of that line out and pass to first receiver, who's Seb Atkinson at 12. Ben Spencer loops that play, and there's a hard line in midfield from Tom Willis. Ben Spencer takes the pullback. There's another pullback behind a hard-running centre to George Ford, and then you have the blindside wing coming round the outside of George Ford. So what you're doing is you're using an intricate play to flood your entire back three into the far 15-metre channel, and that's just really smart. And it's an idea we spoke a little bit about on that commute with Lee Blackett about how he devises. How he'll look at a side's defence and how they've been conceding tries, and I'm fairly sure, and part of this will be Lee Blackett's philosophy and his ambition in attack, but also what he would have seen from Argentina, and maybe seen that going wide early as opposed to punching up and kicking or whatever else was the best way to go. And there are other examples of his real sort of intuitive work around set piece. If you remember, he took the England A side last season. There's a really nice little hidden inside ball from George Kloska, the Bristol tight head, to Ollie Hassel-Collins in the game against Ireland A. So he's really smart at sort of at those first phase moves. There's a try in phase shape in the second test against Argentina, which was born out of a Ben Spencer box kick, one back. They play some quite sort of structured phase stuff in front of the Argentina's 22, realise they're not going anywhere, and George Ford drops into the pocket, pings a kick pass across to Tom Roebuck, and they're 2 offloads, one from Roebuck to Luke Northmore, one from Luke Northmore to Seb Atkinson, and they score with those trailing runners. And that to me, that's a nice blend of phase stuff and first phase stuff. And I think that's what he'll bring, is a real clarity there, a real ambition. The second thing that I think Lee Blackett will bring are the individual skills, challenging players to really sharpen those up. And that can be stuff like pullbacks, so those pullback passes that you will often see from inside centres in first phase, but also those tight forwards, and those decisions at the line, playing really late to the line. I know that he's challenged players at Bath by showing them footage of other players around the Premiership and the sort of best in class. So another example would be an individual asset that he would get players to work on. Edge forwards. I know that he doesn't want edge forwards to just be told, go there. He wants them scanning and making decisions for themselves. And the last try that England scored in the second test to win, I actually thought, it's probably important to say this, I actually thought that they'd been pretty poor for much of that second half again in the second test against Argentina. Sort of falling back into a box kick tennis, really, and that was it was tense and it was quite compelling, but I think that's the kind of thing that Twickenham fans boo, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it was broken up by some really sort of nice interplay by all 3 back rowers. Well, there are about 5 back rowers on the pitch, I think, at that point. And
is that the one with the crazy Ben Curry offload out of contact?
That's right. And then Guy Pepper, who arrived at Bath from Newcastle as this jackling machine, is now got a lot of poise about him on the ball, and holds the ball in 2 hands. He's the one that throws the inside pass. And then the last thing I would add on individual skills, even things as subtle as how fly halves drift behind those forward pods. Really nice example of that is actually before Lee Blackett arrived with England was Finn Smith. I think it's in the lead up to Tom Roebuck's try against Wales in that thrashing. He actually starts. It looks like he starts as part of that forward pod and just drifts off that to take a pullback. Little things like that, I know he's really hot on, and you only have to look at how guys at Bath like Tom de Glanville, Kieran Donahue, these younger guys who he's been such a huge part of this progress that Bath have had, because he's really emboldened and improved those younger players. The last of the 3 areas, thanks for bearing with me, is just the influence he'll have on selection and I guess the knowledge he'll bring from having been around the Premiership with two different sides. So I'm thinking of somebody like, he knows Tom Willis well, for instance. Tom Willis will feel he'll get the best out of Tom Willis. And then I think even in this latest training squad, it was actually a kind of reassuringly boring training squad, I want to say, just from
Yes, very.
there are a few storylines, but the fact that Ben Spencer is still there, I don't think that necessarily would have been guaranteed unless you've got somebody in his corner who's just won a Premiership with him in Lee Blackett, and Ted Hill being there. I think that's very important. So Alex Dombrandt's dropped out. Ted Hill would probably be somebody that has benefited from Alex Dombrandt dropping out, and I know that Lee Blackett wants even more out of Ted Hill. He said he's a freakishly athletic guy to have on the edges, but what he said to me on our commute was that Ted Hill can bring even more to the middle of the pitch and to those pods in the middle of the pitch. So what those three sort of pillars, I think, just going to be fascinating as to how much how much influence, how much change he can impart in this England side.
I hope listeners and viewers are just applauding the depth of that analysis. I personally think you should be trying to line up some sort of sequel commute from Lee's home to Penny Hill when we get to October, November time. I feel like that would be something that we should be exploring.
There's a chance he's sick of me, mate. So I won't count on a return invite.
How could anyone ever be? There was a quote from Aritoje in the Six Nations, which was, I think, must have been before the Italy game, when I don't remember us. This is classic journalist hindsight. I don't remember us piling on the attack this year by round 4 as much as we were the previous year, where it genuinely did look like England hadn't trained the attack at all, and they kind of admitted that when they had their York training week, that during that 2024 Six Nations, that now we're attacking. But Itoje came out before that Italy game and he said, I don't think our attack is as bad as everyone says it is. And then he went on, he was asked, well, what do you want to see from your attack? And he said, we want options at the line, we want to go where the space is, we want 15 players to be fully engaged in that, and we want to be courageous and brave with that. And it's the last point where I think Blackett will make a big difference, because he will really try and embolden this attitude of taking space, creating space, giving it a go. And I really hope that doesn't kind of get lost in the kind of Test rugby fine margins of it all. And right now, obviously, it's all kind of words. We have to see it. But Blackett did say to, I think it was to the BBC Rugby Union Weekly podcast when he was doing his media on Tuesday, that Steve has said, I want this attack to be a true reflection of what Lee Blackett wants. And so if Lee Blackett wants his teams to play without fear, then amazing. Then if we're going to see that from England, incredible. And I also liked that he said that we won't necessarily see funky rugby. I think that needs to be a term that we all use more moving forward. And I enjoyed it. Do you have any more?
Funky rugby sounds like it's sort of got a flimsy connotations, hasn't it? I think one more thing I'd say is that Lee Blackett has come into a side previously that were very renowned for the focus on the sort of nuts and bolts on scrum, line out, kicking, and that's explicitly what Johan van Graan wanted to nail down at Bath before he looked anywhere else. And I think you could just have to see now the variation of Bath's game. It's a shame that I do keep coming back to this about them. It is a bit of a shame that they didn't go deeper in the Champions Cup and didn't really challenge themselves against those bigger sides, because I think they definitely have that capacity now. But there is a real variation about this. And Steve Borthwick is going to healthily challenge Lee Blackett as far as how he can add on, or how I guess they can blend their areas of expertise is the best way of putting it. How, a kick pressure side with a good set piece can also be a side that sees space from wherever on the pitch and attacks that space. And it bodes how Bath went and how Bath evolved, I guess, if that's not too cringy a term, over the last season. I think that bodes really well.
Just as a final point before we end this section, we should talk about the Bath kind of side of it, because I remember chatting to a source for a piece about players who've been really impressing in pre-season on the off-field review Substack a few weeks ago, and they pointed out that actually with Blackett kind of going, that wouldn't necessarily go down very well for the players at Bath who had potentially re-signed because they knew Blackett was going to be there, because he'd signed a new contract in was it January, I want to say, and then also for the players who potentially had maybe thought about joining the club, or who had joined the club knowing that Blackett was there or was going to be there as attack coach as well. I think that's quite an interesting ripple effect from this, and I still think Bath are the clear favourites to win the league, just because of the quality they have in their squad, and because they have all the other pieces of the coaching puzzle are top tier. I am just interested to see if there's kind of a knock-on effect there. And also one final thing, Lee Blackett does still have the record for the fastest try in March 2008, and it was in 8.28 seconds. So There you go. We've come full circle. We've finished the section. Charlie, that was great. Let's take a quick break, and then we're going to dive into the Women's Rugby World Cup semi-finals. Okay, next we're going to chat about the Women's Rugby World Cup semi-finals. We've got New Zealand against Canada on Friday night, and then England against France on Saturday. Charlie, you were in a very, very wet-looking Bristol last Sunday for England's quarter-final win against Scotland. How do you think they are kind of shaping up? Is it fair to say that they've sort of faced patches of adversity, haven't they, without necessarily running into big trouble yet? But that could maybe change this weekend.
Yeah, I think if you looked at their scorelines, it's looked like a cakewalk so far. But there have been patches of adversity. That's probably a good way of putting it. I think given the conditions, they were seriously convincing. Scotland had a really good first 10, 11 minutes where they married sort of real intent with smarts. They were just really kind of shrewd tactically. And then England pulled away their power. I wonder whether it's one of those things where they're uneasy about how much their power game gets complemented, because it sort of implies that their ball movement and their how their backline are picking off defences isn't quite as sharp yet, but it is some weapon. That scrum, Morwenna Talling, Harry Latham called to shout him out and to steal a point from him. Said before the tournament, Morwenna Talling was looking like one of their most important players, and he has been proven right. Very strongly. She was outstanding.
Yeah, they seem to be shaping up well. Does it seem as though Ellie Kildan will be back for this, having missed the quarter-final with concussion? We don't know the team as we record this, but I think the suggestion was that she would be, which could be quite significant. Yeah,
John Mitchell said full bill, clean bill of health. Is that how you say it? So Hannah Bottoman back as well from that back spasm. So tricky decisions to be made. Certainly in the back line, maybe more so with that balance.
And listen, France obviously are going to be without a couple of their players due to bans from their slightly lively quarterfinal against Ireland. I mean, we haven't had a biting ban. I can't remember a biting ban for a long time, but obviously Axel Berthomew's was originally banned for 12 weeks, and now it's cut to 9 on appeal, which I'm not mad about. Having a biting ban reduced for 3 weeks just because you say you feel very sorry because you feel very sorry about it. I'm less convinced by that. But they're also go on, sorry.
because you deliver a social media apology. That's seemingly how she's cut off three weeks. So yes, very rugby.
I mean that's like what we're doing. But they're also going to be without their co-captain Mane Fayu as well, for her ban for a bit of a crazy late tackle. So that's interesting. If I'm honest, maybe because I'm just so used to seeing England kind of win these games. by big margins. They're on this ridiculous run now. Is it over 30 games now, unbeaten since the World Cup? It
I think
must
it's
be near
31.
that.
I might have that wrong.
Yeah, it must be in that bracket. Because I'm so used to England thrashing teams, I'm kind of more interested in the New Zealand Canada semi-final on Friday night, just because I think we know that New Zealand have got all these outrageous talents like Georgia Miller and Portia Woodman and Braxton Sorensen McGee and Rui Demont and all these other players who are just unbelievable. But Canada are interesting. Canada are such a complete side with how they play. Like I can't remember often seeing a team from 1 to 15 with their kind of level of ball skills and ability to attack from anywhere. And they've obviously got world class players in Alex Tessier and Sophie de Goede in particular. But like as a unit, it's just so in control. And if you're asking me right now who I think is going to be in the final out of those two, I'm kind of leaning Canada. Now look, New Zealand have got gun players who could literally win a match on their own. But I think as a team, maybe Canada pull it off. And also, I think I've got a bias here because I love just the fact that Sophie de Goede is a lock and she's kicking goals. And I just love this idea of like England winning this World Cup is going to be an amazing story if it happens. But if it's a forward kicking a winning penalty in a World Cup final in front of 80-odd thousand at Twickenham, part of me doesn't hate that either. So
No, that'd be fair. They're two nicely balanced teams, I think, and two sides whose ball movement has been in kind of plain view, unlike that of England. England probably have those gears to go to, but there just seems like you're right, like a natural fluidity to how Canada play. Sophie de Goede reminds me of, obviously she's got that John Eales goal kicking sort of side of things. She reminds me of Brodie Retallick and Sam Whitelock as far as her prominence in phase play and her poise on the ball. She's the tournament's top carrier and the top offloader, I think, and she's got 4 going into this semi-final weekend. She's got 4 try assists, which is I think 4th of any player, and obviously but the most by any forward. So yeah, what an all-rounder. Bit of a blow for the Black Ferns not having Georgia Miller fit, who's another sort of a player that just sort of enhances her side with that something a little bit different. And in Georgia Miller's case, it's that just sensational athleticism. But yeah, really looking forward to it. I'm at both of those semis, and should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, don't sleep on the Friday semi-final because England are on the Saturday. I think it'll be a hell of a game. Should we chat about just quickly on last weekend's record defeat for New Zealand? I feel like we can't skip past it. I was astonished by how inaccurate the All Blacks were in that second half, and I get that often pressure forces mistakes, and South Africa were incredibly clinical and deserve a lot of credit, especially for the second Cheslin Colby try, which was made off that quick ruck from Sia Khaleesi with that line break. Those are things that I love seeing that. I love the skill with the pass and the break and Colby's finish. Like it's all mega. But so many dumb All Blacks mistakes, just like really poorly executed. The 5 metre line out, I think it was Brody McAllister throwing in. It's not. I don't think the throw is the fault. It's the whole operation. It looks like he's throwing to the box. It's such a bad line out in a pressure situation. The Will Jordan kick out the full was an absolute killer just when they were trying to alleviate pressure. The line speed shambles where Fabian Holland was like sprinting towards the halfway line and Tamati Williams was like still stood still, which leaves RG Snyman with like this cavern to just be like, oh yeah, I'll go through there and score a try. Really clinical from the box, really impressed with that. But yeah, just some of the mistakes from the All Blacks, like that's poor. Yeah, what did you make of it?
It was a horrible sort of way that New Zealand subsided, I think, in that, and at the risk of really sort of at the risk of maybe annoying South Africa fans, I think that the rhetoric around that being one of their greatest ever performances, I think, was a little strong. I think they were exceptional. I think they were really, really good, really clinical. I think a lot of the principles that we've seen under Tony Brown, since Tony Brown's arrival, with their ball movement, with their intent to attack, was really good. And Manny Lebok showed his value with the sort of range of distribution, range of kick passing. But I think
I was so pleased
just
for him.
That penalty from 50 meters or so it must have been a real sort of cathartic moment for him. But I do think that game was just as notable for how New Zealand fell apart. It was really poor. That RG Snyman try that you're talking about just looked really, really passive and actually pretty horrible. And you're just not used to seeing that lack of steel from New Zealand side, as was evidence in that being a record score. But yeah, just a huge swing as far as how confident those two sides are, as far as a sort of neurosis of both of their supporter groups as well, heading into the Bledisloe for New Zealand and the Argentina games for South Africa. Fascinating, because we were saying, weren't we, another South Africa loss, and they're reeling with two games against Argentina to come. But geez, we didn't get one of them.
No, I mean, listen, same narrative for the All Blacks after last weekend as for the Springboks the week before. If you lose badly or you try stuff and it doesn't come off now, amazing, because you're in a good part of the World Cup cycle to be making mistakes and learning from that ahead of 2027. So, I mean, there are kind of worse situations to be in. And as we predicted, after 4 rounds of the Rugby Championship, 2 points separate the 4 teams, and it's Australia who are on top, which, great. I love it. A wide open Rugby Championship, I think, is brilliant, because it hasn't always been that way. There's often been like a runaway leader. So, I mean, yeah, with 2 rounds to go, bring it on. Right. Final section. Charlie, last week we introduced a bit of Name That Player. So I'm just going to recap who the player's biography. We had 2012 to 2019, played for the Hurricanes. 2019 to 2022, played for Wasps. 2022, 2023, played for Ulster. And currently is a Queensland Red. Had 1 cap for New Zealand and has 3 caps for Samoa. And that player is?
Jeffrey Tumunga Allen. Can I carry on to tell you about the try assist that I was raving about? It was against. I found it. It was against. It was against Gloucester in 2021, and he hits a line in midfield, thanks to Lee Blackett's coaching, which is very topical. And he flicks the ball back inside to Rob Miller, the fullback, who could well be on one of these. In this section one day. He's a sort of well-travelled player. Rob Miller scores, but if you play a cam, Jeffrey Tumunga Allen, he sort of bursts to try and keep up with Miller, realises that Miller is going to score, and then his aeroplane sort of Bernat Sal pointing the fingers. It's beautiful. I think he even tilts his head up to the sky to revel in the glory of it all. It's really lovely.
As listeners and viewers will learn, one of Charlie's favourite thing is assist try celebrations, and we will have many more of those coming up. Charlie, that brings me to this week's Name That Player, just while we wrap up. So I'm going to read out their bio quickly. 2010 to 2012, played for Nottingham. 2012 to 2017, played for Gloucester, over 100 appearances there. 2017 to 2020, played for Leicester, and then in 2020 joined the Scarlets. Yes, Charlie.
And then, as a bit of a curveball, there's a bit missing actually from Wiki, so we could see if we can update that. But in the meantime, so the last bit of his career is 2023 ongoing. Van
as well. Bit of Van. Yeah. Oh wow! I mean, very well travelled. Plus quite a few caps for Tonga along the way. So that's this week's Name That Player. No conferring, no answers in public. Save it for next week, but all will be revealed. Charlie, that's us. Lovely to have you back. Lovely to get another episode in the can. enjoy the semi-finals. I hope the forecast is a bit drier. And listen, thank you everybody for liking and subscribing and for sharing it. Please keep going. We're really enjoying kind of what we've seen so far from you. And yeah, the more momentum we can build, the more kind of likes and ratings and follows, the better. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.